Welcome to Team Futurism. Today I'm interviewing Eoin Higgins, a journalist and historian whose writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Intercept, and many other publications. He is also the author of the new book, Owned, How Tech Billionaires on the Right Bought the Loudest Voices on the Left, which I have right here. Just finished reading it and thoroughly enjoyed. So Eoin, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Peter. I really appreciate it.
I kind of want to jump right into the book. There's a lot that we could talk about that's tangential to it, but I kind of want to just dive right into the central thesis of the book. There is this strange phenomenon where over the past few years, a lot of public figures on the left have not only moved right, but have suddenly found themselves to be best friends with Fox News and Tucker Carlson and Trump even. Give me the pitch for how you explain what's happened here, and just give me maybe the thesis for your book.
Yeah, I think that there are just a lot of competing elements to this shift, right? On the one hand, you have people getting older, people's politics changing. Maybe they feel like they're being left behind by changing social mores and changing political landscape, at least as far as the left goes. I think there's a lot of this for both Greenwald and Taibbi, who I use as kind of the people to examine this phenomenon in. But I would say that kind of natural conservatism that comes with age, in this case, acts in parallel with the kind of takeover of alternative media or attempted takeover of alternative media by the far right in Silicon Valley, and just all of this capital and money that goes toward creators if they start, parroting the company line as far as these guys are concerned. So you have somebody like Glenn Greenwald, whose politics, I think, are kind of maybe a little more difficult to kind of categorize in some ways, but he has certainly become more right-wing over the years. I think that's inarguable. And he started to go on to Fox News a lot, which then, turned him into somebody who had a lot of good things to say about Fox News. And from there, he goes independent. He leaves the Intercept, and there's a whole kind of reward structure put in place in the right-wing alternative media ecosystem. He starts at Substack, and then he gets a contract with Peter Thiel and JD Vance funded Rumble. He is doing speaking engagements for Balaji Srinivasan and for different crypto stuff. Like there's money here to be made. And I think it's quite obvious that you don't get to make that money if you are putting forward the kind of message that these guys do not want to have out there. Somebody like Taibbi is kind of like a little more transparent, not intentionally, but just because he lacks the kind of cleverness or intelligence that Glenn has, and he has just gone completely off the deep end there. He's gone completely to the right, and he parrots a lot of Silicon Valley right-wing talking points around vaccines and around the kids being woke, I guess, is kind of like the way to put it, right? And he's rewarded by his access to Elon Musk's Twitter files, and he doesn't really appear on Fox that much. He's more of he's kind of more B tier to Glenn's A tier. He appears on Newsmax and kind of these more gutter right wing cable news channels, but he too has been rewarded by this. So I think that there is the shift in politics that kind of naturally happened, and then that was accelerated by the fact that there was in place an existing power structure that was there ready to reward them for making this shift, and that their shift kind of coincided with this push by Silicon Valley billionaires to kind of reshape the media in their image.
Yeah, so I want to drill down on what your actual claim is, perhaps just so that people aren't, too startled by it, or the expectation is set correctly. So your argument isn't necessarily that Peter Thiel and these people like handed Glenn Greenwald $1 million and say, here's your talking points, like go out with them into the world and run with them. Like it's not quite that transparent. It's not like they are actually literally owned. It's more of they were being rewarded for their right-wing talking points that they kind of like had maybe some sort of affinity to. And then while the left was like criticizing them, the right was embracing them. And that it just happened to be kind of where all the money was at the same time because of new platforms like Substack and Rumble and these other places. Is that kind of a fair assessment, or how far would you how would you say like what point are they actually quote unquote owned versus like they're just being rewarded?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two things to unpack here. So one is that like that's kind of like half of the thesis, right? Half of the thesis is dealing with these journalists. The other half of the thesis is talking about how Silicon Valley shifted to the right, how Silicon Valley made this decision to invest in these platforms. And that I think is kind of more of like that's really more the underlying thesis of the book. While Glenn and Matt and like their journey to the right and are used as an example of how this happens. But I would say that if you look at people who criticize the news media, often when criticizing mainstream media, and Glenn and Matt have done this throughout their careers, so I feel confident in using this language, or I feel like using this language is appropriate, right? Because this is the way that they've talked about it, right? So you have somebody who is a commentator on MSNBC, or let's say actually not say commentator, like somebody with the show there, right? Or somebody with the show on Fox, or somebody with the show on CNN. There are certain aspects of the news that they are going to be expected to either cover or not cover, or cover in a certain way.
Right.
And that doesn't need to be spoken. That is understood. It's understood that because you work for the corporate media, that you are going to take certain positions or not take certain other positions, right? And this is kind of the same thing. It's just being done in a more alternative media ecosystem kind of way. Rather than having a show on a cable news channel that's seen by a few 100,000 to 1 million people a night, instead of that, you have a Substack that's read by hundreds of thousands of people every day, or you have a show on Rumble that's watched by maybe 1,000 or tens of thousands of people. They don't have quite the same reach, but they certainly are providing Glenn with money to put his show on there. The incentive structure and the reward structure is the same in different types of media. It's just that in this case, the media is like this media ecosystem is controlled, and the platforms are owned by the Silicon Valley billionaires, the right-wing Silicon Valley billionaires who have publicly shifted their politics far to the right over the recent decade, I would say, and especially over the last 5 years. And in doing that, they've decided that they want to have a more pliable, controllable. I mean, Balaji Srinivasan says this explicitly in his writings about the network state. He says that they want to have a parallel media infrastructure, one that basically parrots their talking points and puts their point of view forward. Andreessen, Marc Andreessen, the billionaire investor, has talked about this as well. We don't want a media that's so critical. We want a media that supports our point of view. Peter Thiel has criticized the media as being like too critical, too mean, and so then he invests in media companies, and the people that he gives money to, like Glenn, end up getting paid by Rumble, the YouTube clone that he invested in, as well as getting money from people like David Sachs, who's a very close Thiel ally, to come to his All In podcast, or Balaji, who's also like a Thiel ally. Both of these guys had Glenn come speak at his conference, and he made money from that as well. So I think that to the extent that they are quote unquote owned, it has to be kind of seen in this way where we're using this term to kind of refer to the way that this media ecosystem has been taken over and how these guys are emblematic of the people who have kind of, in my view, kind of sold their principles for cash from these guys.
That's what's so interesting about this is that Peter Thiel and David Sachs, they've always been pretty conservative characters, and
Publicly.
we expect them, publicly, we expect them to be pretty conservative because that's like how they projected the world. Like Peter Thiel obviously like was a big Trump supporter back in 2016, which was rare in Silicon Valley back in the day. It's strange when you start looking at someone like Matt Taibbi or Glenn Greenwald, where they are creatures of the left. At least that's how they've, especially Greenwald, that's like definitely like how he signaled himself. So, I mean, there are a ton of these characters, right? There's like Tulsi Gabbard, Dave Rubin, maybe Michael Schellenberger. Some people might even say Bari Weiss, although I think that she's pretty principled in her perspectives, compared to a lot of these people, at least for sure. But why did you?
I would disagree with that, but go on.
Oh well, maybe let me pause there because I've never talked to anybody about this, and maybe it could be interesting. So every time I go to like criticize, if I ever want to like online criticize the free press, I have in my mind like, oh, this is how they're messing up, and then I'll like go on their site and they had just published an essay like brutally criticizing Trump, and sure, there's like throat clearing, but like whatever. But I was like, oh, I didn't know that would be here today, and so I've literally swallowed a couple of criticisms of them because I'm like, oh, maybe they are harsher on the Trump administration. Maybe they're not like fully like cultists or whatever. I don't. Maybe I've lowered my expectations. I'm not too sure, but like, yeah, what is your pitch for critiquing the free press?
I mean, I just think that it's a serially dishonest and shoddily edited outlet that is generally full of lies. They are.
Do you think ideological lies? That's the most interesting.
Oh no, factual lies. Factual lies. Like,
okay.
Yeah, their articles are. I mean, I haven't. This isn't referring to something like relatively recently, but like their articles have come in for a lot of criticism for either just outright lying or obfuscating, not mentioning like other factors. It's a site that sure it'll criticize Trump on occasion, but you don't see things on there, like a constant barrage of things advocating for Palestinian liberation or for trans rights or specifically things that are. I don't think I've ever read anything on there that's been critical of Marc Andreessen, who's one of the major funders of the free press. I don't think I've ever read anything on there that's been particularly critical of Peter Thiel or.
Good point.
Musk is a little bit different because he's more of a public figure at this point. But I think that separating the free press, which is very much part of the ecosystem that I'm describing here, and maybe even it's slightly different because they are really trying to create a publication that is supposed to kind of stand up against mainstream. There was just an article in Breaker. This is Lachlan Cartwright's kind of media gossip blog or his outlet, but this is some media gossip that was on there that she was at New York Post luncheon and was talking to I think the executive editor about how she wants to turn the free press into News Corp. That is free press is almost kind of like the next evolution of what we're talking about here. That
I think so. Yeah.
And what they've done was kind of outside of the scope of the book, and also over the last few months has kind of changed a little bit. But what they're trying to do is to kind of make their own like little media empire. But I would not call them principled at all. I would say, unless you're saying that their principles are.
Oh, I just meant Bari Weiss specifically. Like she always like is consistent with. She hasn't done any weird like radical transformations like Glenn Greenwald has. Like she's always been like kind of center. People on the far right who I know would call her left. Still, you know what I mean?
Yeah, those people don't know what they're talking about. She's always been a right-wing propagandist, the entire time. I mean, if you go back to her Wall Street Journal, New York Times days, this has been consistent. She's never been anything else.
Well, that's actually what I'm saying. She's consistent. I feel like she has been consistent.
Right. Yeah. So that I'll go. Yeah, she's consistent, but what she's consistent in is dishonest and propaganda. Is what I'm saying.
I mean, I'll follow you partly down. I also might just like be more centrist than you two.
That's no, no,
Might
yeah,
totally
that's fair.
bias me. But not to linger on this too long, but so I read the New York Times every single day, and I read the Atlantic every single day. The same criticism that you leveled against the free press, which is totally fair, I could say to the New York about the New York Times. I told my wife actually just last night when I was done like reading everything that's posted for the day. I was like, this magazine or this newspaper would be so much more interesting if they would throw a curveball at me. Like if they would publish Ben Shapiro or something like, I know what Michelle Goldberg is going to say. And I read every essay she publishes. I know what she's going to say. I'm never shocked. And like, sure, they have like John McWhorter, who's like kind of sort of centrist, but like in the safest possible way, never says anything remotely like radical.
Like socially conservative, but.
Right, exactly. Sure. Yeah, but like super safe, super, and obviously thoughtful and smart. So I get why he's there. But like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this criticism could be leveled at almost like literally any publication.
You could level the criticism that a publication is their opinion page is putting forward a point of view, right?
Yes.
I think you could do that for the New York Times, for the Atlantic and the Free Press are kind of more similar. They're kind of like the Atlantic's like less right wing than centrist, but it certainly has like a point of view that is similar to the Free Press in some ways. Although I call them centrist. They're kind of hard to pin down because they have kind of, but New York Times, centrist liberal opinion page. But the difference I would say is that the New York Times' reporting is fact based.
Yeah,
and the Free Press presents a lot of its ideological propagandistic reporting that is like error riddled and like leaves stuff out and like is trying to put forward a point of view. It registers that or it presents that as straight reporting, and I will give the Times credit that they don't do that, other than their like analysis pieces, news analysis pieces, which are in the news, which are just basically like opinion page. This is like turning into a whole digression where we're talking about different. But I guess that's what I would say, that like I don't feel like the Free Press has that standard, and until they do, I mean, I think if they had like a strong fact-based newsroom, like with like actual reporting on issues that wasn't like just so like blatantly ideological, I would be more open to what you're saying. But because they are so ideological and because they do put forward such a genuinely like right-wing point of view that aligns with the goals and the ideas of these Silicon Valley right-wing billionaires, that I don't think that they really line up in the same way. Like something like Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal opinion page, in my opinion, is like lunatic right-wing stuff, but their reporting is A+. Like you cannot criticize it. You know what I mean? Like, so like that's kind of the difference I'm talking about. Yeah.
I mean, one last note on the Free Press is I do think it's insane. They have Batya Ungar-Sargon as like a full-time staffer, and she just is a cultist. Like, there's no other way to describe her. She's a Trump cultist at this point. And I remember like before Trump was elected, she was talking to Destiny on his live stream, and Destiny was like, "Oh, so you're voting for Trump, right?" And she's like, "No, I haven't really made up my mind. I'm not really sure." And he's like, "No, that means you're voting for Trump." And it's like, of course she was. It was just so obvious. And then she did, and she became like a cult member or whatever. That's like her job now, I guess. So
totally opportunistic too.
Opportunistic, yeah.
I don't take her seriously at all. She's not even worth like discussing. She's
Okay, well, to get back to your book a little bit, you do focus on Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald, and you have some history there, especially with Greenwald. So I think it'd be interesting to talk about that a little bit. Like, talk about your history with Greenwald and where you are with him, like personally, and just some of that evolution. I think is very interesting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't want to like overstate it, but I admired him when I was in college. I thought that he was like a really great writer. I liked that he was. I describe myself in the book as a civil libertarian leftist, which is a very like specific to the Bush era thing, right? And then like kind of and I think that when your politics are formed, that kind of determines your politics kind of going forward. Like, like no matter how many evolutions you have along the way, Like that is that's kind of the central thing. And so because my politics were kind of really forged in the Bush years and my opposition to the wars, both like Afghanistan and Iraq, and like the entire like prosecution of the so-called war on terror, as well as like Bush's general bushiness. I really appreciated Glenn's kind of principled pushback against him, and what I also really appreciated though is that he went after Democrats as well for their inaction / kind of just like going capitulation support for what Bush was doing, and I thought that was like a really important point of view to get out there. And I got out of college. I got a master's. I didn't really like know what to do. I just got married, and my wife was like, "Well, look, you like to write. You like what these guys write. So why don't you do that?" And so I just kind of started blogging, and then I fell into a newspaper job. Like how I got here is kind of tripping over a rock and falling over something, and just like somehow landing on my feet and ending up as a journalist. And within like 2 years, I got my first piece published at the Intercept, where I had applied for a job before I even had started to write. I think even before I went to graduate school. And I worked there for, I wouldn't say I worked there, I was a contributor for a few years. And probably the biggest story that I worked on there was the Alex Moore story. This was a guy who was running against Richard Neal, very powerful Massachusetts Democrat. And he got kind of smeared by this kind of Me Too thing, saying that he was going after like college students. And also he was gay. So this was kind of like an added layer to this. Like there was like this kind of like, oh, gay guy going after young men kind of thing. Like there were a lot of layers to this. And and in the course of reporting, I reported it with Ryan Grimm and another reporter at the Intercept. And in the course of doing it, like my side of the reporting ended up exposing that the Massachusetts Democratic Party was in on this, and like it was pretty intense. And he praised my work effusively, and he and I had been like kind of DM buddies, I guess, on Twitter. Like we talk every once in a while about just like mundane things, or about the news, or about whatever. And then when he left the Intercept, I reported on that as well. And I talked to him. We did an interview together. He opened up to me and told me all this stuff. And then after that, he started to kind of shift to the right, and I became critical of him. And we kind of had like a falling out, to the extent that you can have a falling out with somebody who you're not like super close with. Like we were like we've never met in real life. Like like we've only interacted online. And I became more and more critical of him, and I started writing things that were critical of him, and we sniped back and forth on Twitter a little bit. And then I got reached out, and then Bold Type folks reached out to me, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to write a book about Glenn's political de-evolution." And and I said, "Sure, I'd love to do that if I can write about this tech aspect of it too," which kind of like took over the book. But that's kind of my history with Glenn. And then as far as Matt goes, I mean, I when I was in college, that was during the financial crisis, and his writing was quite influential at the time. I'd never been like a huge fan of his, but I don't want that to sound like, oh, I always knew he was bad or something. It's not that. It's just that like his stuff just never really hit me the same way.
Yeah.
But that's just subjective. It's just taste. It's not that I thought that his stuff was bad. It just wasn't particularly in line with my interests. I read his book Hate Incorporated back in 2019, which was kind of critical of primarily. He used MSNBC and Fox to kind of talk about like corporate media pushing an agenda of right and left, and I found it to be interesting. I had some issues with it, but it was an interesting book. And then shortly thereafter, I feel like he kind of went off the deep end with the COVID stuff. But That's kind of so that's my background with these guys. So like I've known who they are for a long time, and then if not peers, at least we were kind of in the same alternative media space for quite some time. And that's kind of like that kind of preceded a lot of all this.
As these characters and others have made this turn to the right, have they swayed anybody from the left to come with them, or have they just like totally adopted a new audience and now people on the right who watch Fox News know about and like these guys in the way that the left used to? Or is there, I mean, is anybody like who's from the left being like, oh, now Glenn Greenwald is moving right, so I am too? Like, do they have any sort of a sway like that?
I mean, I think that they do. I think that it is difficult to track this kind of stuff without doing like a survey or a poll or something, right? We can really only rely on anecdata. And one thing Glenn told me, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at social media, you look at the way that a lot of people who supported Bernie Sanders, in 2016, 2020, kind of pivoted to the right, especially after Biden was elected. And I think this is kind of maybe partly because of Matt and Glenn, and partly because of just people being contrarian and seeing that's kind of an avenue to be listened to, right? If you're critical of these people, and again, I don't think that there's anything wrong with being critical of Democrats. In fact, I think that's very good. I think people should be critical of them. They're one of the two major parties in the United States, and they don't deserve to be let off the hook for anything.
Democrats do a pretty good job of cleaning up their own house. Republicans do not. Republicans need more internal criticism. So I totally agree. Being a Democrat, I criticize the Democrats. I wish Republicans would do the same.
Yeah, although the other side to that would be that the Republicans have had a lot of success not doing that. So maybe
okay.
maybe the Democrats,
for the good of the country, I wish they would. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, these are two separate things, right? The Republicans wouldn't want to do it because it wouldn't be good for them. But maybe that'll be good for the country. But as far as like anecdotally, I've seen people shift to the right. Again, like how much of this is because of external forces? How much of this is because they see Glenn and Matt doing well and having success? How much of this is because their politics are actually changing? I think the answer, and maybe this isn't exactly what you're looking for, but I think the answer is it depends and it's complicated. But you know what I mean? Like it just is. But I will say that Glenn, when I was talking to him, so I talked to him for the book in February of last year. We talked for a few hours, and during our conversation, we talked about his position on Israel and Palestine. And he said that his criticism of Israel and his advocacy for Palestine had seen him lose support from the right, from his conservative audience that had built up, and that he had made up for it, over the course of. So this was February 2024. The war in Gaza kicked off like October 2023. So I guess so you're saying basically in 4 months, like it just kind of went down and back up. And I think that indicates that his audience anyway is kind of a little more ideologically diverse. And I think that he still has a lot of credibility in some circles on the left for his reporting on the NSA spying scandal, for his position on Palestine. And I think in general, people see him as kind of a surveillance opponent. Now you could poke holes in a lot of this stuff and say, oh, well, and I do in the book and also in articles that I've written since. But I think that it is true that his political positions are a little more nuanced in a lot of ways. Although I think that it is true that he has benefited greatly from the kind of parallel between his ideological point of view and the ideological point of view of the people who own and support the platforms that that he's on now. And we should also remember, right? Like the Intercept was founded by, or is funded by Pierre Omidyar, founder of eBay. So this is like Silicon Valley tech money, and funding Glenn's journalism is not something.
Yeah, that is a great point. One thing that's interesting to me about Matt Taibbi in particular is that I do think, just like personality wise, he's more susceptible to being quote unquote bought, in a sense. And that, like, I remember right after the Twitter files, maybe a couple months after that, he tweeted something about Elon Musk, about how Elon Musk, I've gone way out of my way to not criticize you. And so basically, like, be nice to me or whatever. And it's like, that's just so, like, apparent. It's like, don't just, like, you're a journalist. Your job isn't to be nice to the richest guy in the world. Like, your job is to be critical of the richest guy in the world. If anything, even if you're like kind of like sort of low-key working for him on the Twitter files situation, still, like, that doesn't mean you don't have your day job being a journalist and, like, criticize the guy. And, like, he should be thick-skinned enough to take some criticism from journalists. He should respect that. Even that, to me, was like, whoa, okay, that's a little beyond the pale there, Matt. It's kind of like giving away the game.
Yeah, I agree. When he posted that, it was, I remember reading it and just being like, oh, this is perfect. This is going in the book, 100%. I think so. A couple things about Matt. I think that getting kind of soft Me Too'd in 2016 or in 2017, like late 2017. So he had been very critical of the Russiagate scandal and the associated conspiracy theories that were kind of all over like MSNBC and other like liberal media at the time. And liberals and Democrats hated him for that. Like they turned on him. And so he had this book called I Can't Breathe that was about Eric Garner, and that came out, and that was, in my view, was his attempt to kind of reset things with liberals and Democrats, saying, "Hey, we're still cool though, guys." Like, and then Mike Cernovich and some other like marginal figures on the right kind of brought up all of this writing that he had done while he was in Russia, working on the Exile, this expat newspaper back in the late 90s, early 2000s, mostly in the late 90s, talking about, like sexual assault, borderline at least, young girls, drugs, all of this kind of stuff, and used it to kind of, I guess, smear him, although it's kind of hard to say smear when it's his writing, but like whatever. And he kind of watched his book kind of crash and burn, and that kind of started. And one of the reasons that it did that was because liberals got on board with this, and they were like, "Yeah, screw this guy," I guess would be the PG way to say it. Yeah, we don't like him either. Like whatever, and I think that experience soured him on liberals and the left kind of permanently.
Yeah.
And so then, like when COVID comes around, he's a big time anti-vax conspiracy theorist, or at least conspiracy curious at the time. At this point, he's completely gone. And then
I actually didn't know that. That's depressing.
yeah. If you go to his page now,
I'm not gonna.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And then he also. He just kind of started to, his politics got more conservative, like rapidly. Like he got more.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, it was crazy how rapidly it was. And for me, in my mind, it totally coincided with the Twitter files. Is that kind of true? Or
I think it kind of started beforehand, but yes, if you look at his stuff since then, I mean, it's been like really like over the top. I mentioned in the book, there's like a thing that he wrote. I think it was called Thanksgiving is Awesome or something. It's like totally like it's South Parkization of like, politics, but like, he's just like, Howard Zinn is a loser because he doesn't like America. And it's like, man, look, like, you know, that book is pretty important. It's a valuable piece of U.S. history. Like, even if you come to the opposite conclusion of it, like, you have to, like, you know, like, just saying, oh, this book is just like anti-American propaganda is just like, you're not. It's very annoying to me as somebody who's a historian that, like, that he says this, because, like, that's not, like, you can disagree with it, but, like, just say, like, oh, this is stupid and people shouldn't pay attention to it. It's just like we're not talking about Niall Ferguson here. So anyway, so like this, but I bring that up as like an example of kind of how his reactionary, like the reason I bring that up as an example of his reaction to politics is not because it's like particularly egregious, but because that's just basically like Fox News Republican, like
Yes.
kind of like takes, right? And then
Yes.
so after he gets the Twitter files because David Sachs suggests him to Elon Musk, and then he reports them out. And then I think this is really important. It's very obvious with the way that he acts about the Twitter files that he is expecting this to be his version of Glenn's NSA spying scandal, and that he's going to win awards and perhaps the Pulitzer like Glenn did, and that this is like a huge deal. And it turns out that it's actually not really that huge of a deal. I think the Twitter files are very interesting because they show the internal workings of a private company, but I don't think that they are like groundbreaking by any means. And it doesn't show, and I think most importantly, it doesn't show what they said it was going to show. It's not. It's not this explosive.
And yet they continue to insinuate that it showed those things. Because I was waiting for some bombs to drop that never dropped. You know.
Yeah. They like I write in the book. Li Fang had an interesting report on some like it's escaping me right now, but it's like some foreign intel agency of the U.S. like getting like whitelisted, which is like the opposite of being blacklisted, obviously, on Twitter for these accounts that were, you know, putting forward like messages that the U.S. State Department or like whatever like wanted to get put forward. And Bari Weiss unintentionally revealed that like Libs of TikTok had special like permissions even before Elon Musk came on. Like, these are interesting things, right?
Yeah.
But like the stuff that Matt was reporting on, like he was saying that this was an example of like a far-ranging conspiracy between like Twitter and the U.S. government to silence you. And it just wasn't. That's just not what it was. Like it did not show that. And so I think that he got even more bitter about that. And I think that's pushed him even further to the right. But just to circle all the way back to like what you said at the beginning of this, which is when he released, what you're referring to is he released these screenshots of his conversation with his text message conversations with Elon Musk. And the reason that Taibbi got angry with Musk in the first place is that Musk throttled links from Substack because he wanted everybody
that's right. I forgot about that detail. Yeah.
So because he wanted that to happen, because he didn't want people to be using Substack, and then Substack introduced its like feed, which is kind of like a Twitter knockoff, sort of. Musk got really mad at them and throttled them because, of course, he's no free speech warrior and never has been. and in his text, like I think the direct quote is like, "Elon, I've refrained from criticizing you," and like, you know, and it's like, I mean, look, I'm a journalist. Like, I get that like sometimes you have to like pick and choose like who you're going to be critical of. And who to not be critical of, because like there's a bigger story waiting in the wings. Yeah. And maybe it's better to let, like, hey, look, Twitter is millions of people acting like their worst selves in a lot of ways, a lot of times. Like, I guarantee you, Elon Musk is being criticized intensely by a lot of people at any time, especially in the news media, especially on the left and on the right. So why not just kind of like let that play out? I totally get it. But like, to send him this message where you're like whining about like how he's like treating Substack and like, you know, he's being mean to you is ridiculous. And that's not how you should treat a source, especially when that source is the richest person in the world. Also, I would just add like that Taibbi still tries to pretend. He tries to be really cute with this. And he's like, well, I've never said that, you know, Elon was the source for the Twitter files. And it's like, okay, yeah, but like, everybody else did, and like we know like how it happened. So, you know, like you should just admit it. But I think that that's my long-winded answer here. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that like his politics were moving to the right and had been moving to the right for arguably about 10 years at this point, or at least 9. What changed? I think you're right. I think it did really change around the Twitter files, because I think that him not getting the recognition that he expected, that he wanted from it, and having the only people who were like, oh yeah, no, this is a really big story, were like conspiracy-minded people on the right, plus him, just having all of this COVID stuff happen. I think that's just kind of like what pushed him over the edge.
So there is a lot in the book, a lot more that we still could talk about. And one of the interesting things about the book is that it does like document this kind of fascinating history of American culture, which is kind of like what this is at this point. But in the interest of time, I want to jump to a couple of last topics here that are kind of just tangentially related to the book. My first question here is, what do you make of the Elon-Trump breakup? And how do you think that it will impact the MAGA movement going forward?
Yeah, so I've written about this, funnily enough, for someone who's been such a long time critic of MSNBC. I write for them now occasionally, and I wrote for them about this twice last week, which is that I think that the most important thing is that Democrats need to not ally with Musk. They need to continue to be critical of him. They need to not make any common cause with him. The consequences of what he's done with Doge are going to kill hundreds of thousands of people in countries that aren't this one, and that in this country are going to dismantle the social safety net in ways that people still don't understand. So I think that's so that's A. I think that's number one. And I know that's not the MAGA movement, but I just want to say that that's like that. I think that's the number one most important thing right now. Is like, just let them fight. Who cares? Like, hopefully they both damage each other. That's all. Whatever. As far as what it does to the MAGA movement, it's been interesting to watch kind of who is aligned with who. But ultimately, Trump is the president and is the leader of Make America Great Again and the Republican Party. And he is the Republican Party. He's been with the Republican Party, has been my entire life. He's just like the most like outward expression of it. And so I think that because of that, I don't think that Musk getting hissy with him on Twitter makes a difference. You know what I mean? Like, I think that ultimately what Trump represents is not only like the far right movement that he has kind of been at the center of, and he's brought a lot of people into that movement, but he also represents like white evangelicals. He also represents the what I guess we could like euphemistically call the Southern strategy of Republicans, right? The silent majority, like all of this stuff that has built the Republican Party over the past like 7 decades. Trump is the manifestation of it, and so he like the reason that Republicans love him so much is not because like he is something new. It's because he is just like, he's just saying out loud what they all believe and have always believed. So it's just that's kind of my way of saying that I just don't think that there's a world in which like Elon Musk, one of the most unpopular people in the country who has zero charisma, is going like, what I mean, is like going to be able to like wrest MAGA away from Trump, who like, so, like, until Trump loses, like actually faces consequence for something, or actually like faces a major loss other than like 2020, I'm not going to bet against him when it comes to him, like versus like somebody else.
Yeah, no, I think that you're definitely right about this. Interestingly, there's one poll that's been going around Twitter. Open Source Zone tweeted this, and Noah Smith retweeted it with a comment. But the poll said among Republicans that 71% of Republicans would side with Trump, and only 6% would side with Musk. In the aftermath of this fallout, which like that's actually shocking to me. Like I kind of knew Trump obviously would like get the Republicans, but 6% for Musk. I mean, like, yeah, that's like nothing. That's like basically none of them care about what he has to say, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he had like the Republican base liked Elon Musk when Trump said that Elon Musk was good.
Yes, and
now that Trump says that Elon Musk is bad, they think that. I mean, and by the way, this is not exclusive to Republicans. Like Democrats are quite partisan in this way too, but Republicans are more. They have, I mean, maybe it's an authoritarian streak, or maybe they just have better party discipline. But they've always kind of been like this, right? They fall in line. So this is not surprising to me that they would take this position.
So I have one last question for you, and this seems to be everyone's favorite question on YouTube right now. So I feel like you're actually a great person to ask this to. So do you think that the left needs a Joe Rogan in this moment? And let me caveat this in that I just caught some of Bill Maher's segment from yesterday, and he said, rather than conjuring up your own Joe Rogan, ask yourself why you lost the old one, because he used to be on our side. What do you think about all of that? And do you think that we should, Bill Maher's pitch was we should try to like get Joe Rogan back? Or like, do we need our own? Or is this just a dumb topic? I'm curious about your thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Maher just wants the Democrats to hate trans people and to.
I don't think that's fair. I think
I'm being diplomatic. I'm being diplomatic about Bill. I know
he's an old school liberal, right? He's 70 years old. He's an old school liberal, like, and most people in this country who vote are pretty old too. So like this.
I think it's questionable if he's even marginally liberal at this point. I would like, to me, this is like one of the problems with the left is that we kick people out. Like in your book, you said that Coleman Hughes you didn't say it. Someone you quoted said that Coleman Hughes is on the right. Like Coleman Hughes did a whole half-hour podcast about how he's not on the right. Like, guys, like, please quit saying this. And we like on the left, we should not kick people out. Say that they're not on the right, but like what they believe in is on the right. Like I'm like I guess that Bill Maher has made really clear that the kind of political party that he wants to belong to is one that does not respect the rights of trans people, that does not respect
Isn't that like the right's talking point, though, that they're making that their issue?
Yes, but Bill agrees.
In the world of politics and the things that affect people's day-to-day lives, it's basically a non-issue. That's like a rounding error of humans that affects. Like I don't think that it's fair to like
it is a rounding error. It is a rounding error of people that it affects. So
he voted for all the right people. Bill Maher.
Yeah. No. So am I. I'm not saying you. I'm saying him. So
So Bill Maher voted for all the right people. He, wants the right sort of ish economic policies, and he is the loudest, most vocal critic, oftentimes, of like mainstream-ish media against Trump, to an audience who like might think that's meaningful. I mean, I don't think we should at all be like, dude, Bill Maher, you don't belong here. Like he's so valuable, I think, to the left.
I mean, he just went and had dinner at the White House with Trump and said nothing but nice things about him in a 15-minute monologue.
He was being honest about it, though. Like I appreciate that. I get the criticism, but what do you want?
I think we'll probably not agree on Bill Maher. So let's just let's just move on. I think that as far as like somebody like Rogan, I mean, Rogan has been a conspiracy theorist for a long time. Like I don't know if he was ever really like someone who was on the left. I think so. Here's what I think. I think Rogan is on the right now, but I don't think that Rogan really had like established politics before like 5 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
I think that's true.
Like he really didn't like, and he's always kind of been like this guy who just.
It was COVID, kind of like that.
It was COVID. Say, right? Like before that, it was kind of like he would just be like you would say something to him, and he would be like, "Oh yeah, sure, I believe that." And then like somebody like who believes the exact opposite of you would say something the exact opposite of that, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I believe that." Like he just kind of like believes the last thing that he heard. But I think that as he's gone to the right, the last thing that he's heard has increasingly been like far right conspiracy theories or like conservative stuff. Also, he's like, speaking of the book, he's like really good friends with all these guys, like, you know, Peter Thiel, like Marc Andreessen. You know, when Mark Zuckerberg has his kind of like soft Trump coming out party, he goes on Rogan to do it. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think that really like the Democratic Party, which I'm not a member of. So like, you know, so take my advice with like, you know, a grain of salt, right? But I don't know if like they should really be trying to get him or someone like him back at this point. I think that you want to find a way to appeal to like someone who is like Joe Rogan like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Someone who's relatively apolitical. You know, maybe they voted for Trump last election, but the reason was almost certainly like economic, right? So I kind of look at it like this, right? So you have like 45% well, not even the electorate, just people who will vote, right? Like, I mean, Trump has the support, honestly, of like 23% of the country, like realistically, or at least like as far as like those are the people that voted for him. 70%, 70 million people is like a fifth almost. So you have like, but anyway, you have like 45% of the voting electorate is going to vote for the Republican. 45% is going to vote for the Democrat. You have 10% in the middle who are like undecided voters. These people are usually, and I want to be really clear when I say this, that like this is not meant as criticism or judgment of them in either direction. I'm simply describing like this like so 10% or maybe like 8% if you take out 2% third party. Now I'm starting to just digress. Look, roughly 10% of people who swing elections, and they tend to vote on economic pocketbook stuff. These people are not paying attention to politics. They are relatively apolitical. They vote because they have an interest in politics to the extent that they believe that they should fulfill their civic duty, but they are not like ideological.
Yeah.
So when you have, I think if you have like 4 years of an economic recovery that just wasn't seen by a lot of people as the economic recovery that it was, and you know, just saying, hey, look, the graph shows like the line is going up. Like if you say that to somebody who is struggling, they don't care. Like that doesn't change their life. You have like a lot of social programs that were put in place under Trump to help with COVID that then were taken away. And people, fairly or not, are going to blame the party in power when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't even pay attention to the election until like the 2 weeks beforehand. So they tune in, and what do they see? They see one person saying, you know, giving a kind of like, we're just going to do the same thing we just did for the last 4 years. Then they see somebody else saying, there's a problem and I'm going to fix it.
That's a great point.
You need to find a better message to address that.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of crap out there with people being like, "Oh, this is all social stuff. Like you need to like this, like you need to win back Joe Rogan with like, you know, moderating on social issues and stuff like that." Like the people who decide elections do not care about this stuff. They care about economics. They care about the pocketbook. And
let me drill into the teeny tiny bit, because I feel like even the question that I asked, it's the question everyone asks, but it's not quite the right question.
Well, I totally digress. Actually, I totally digressed on the original question. So just before we do that, I guess what I'd say is, does the left need a liberal Joe Rogan / do they need to get Joe Rogan back? My argument is no. They need to have a clear message about how they're going to help people, and they have not had that in the last.
That's brilliant. I totally agree with that.
That's what I'm saying. And so what I'm just saying, like all the social conservative stuff on that stuff, that's all marginal.
Yeah.
If you offer people a better life, they're not going to care if like that better life comes with respecting people's gender identity. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to, nobody cares about that. Like if you're going to give people a better healthcare system, like and you have and like you deliver on it, they're not going to care about like immigration in the same way that they do. And already, by the way, like a lot of the policies that Trump is pursuing already with this stuff are massively unpopular, even unpopular with his base. So I think that what that shows to me is that you have like the people who end up deciding the election are people who you just need to appeal to through economic stuff. You need to offer them a change from what's going on. Just offer them a positive message.
I think that is perfectly well said. And yeah, we can end it there. But really quickly, where can people find out more about you and your writing beyond the book, which is owned? And I'll put a link to this down in the show notes. But yeah, where can people follow you and find your writing?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, first name, last name, ELINHIGGINS _. I'm on Blue Sky, first name, last name, .bsky.social, I think. And yeah, I mean, I post my writing on both of those places. That's basically where I write. I work for a business to business newsletter, but that might not be of interest to a lot of people. But if you want to follow my political writing, just follow me on those two social media companies.
Great, I appreciate it. Well, thanks again for coming on, Owen. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Peter.